Weekly report for December 16th. Well, last week we struggled and tried to make a new high here in the market from this small previous high. It still does give us a new all-time high, but pretty weak action here and then kind of rolled over. Interesting that it was really unable to close at a new high, and if it did, it was just barely. Looking at the account last week, nothing changed. Still in setup mode here. But I did complete stages 1 through 3, and the notebook and manual are set up and looking pretty good. I was going to put this calendar in on a monthly basis, but I thought I'd also throw it here on a weekly basis, and I just highlighted each of my work logs. Once again, making sure you're accountable. That's what this is all about. Obviously, from the amount of work I did last week, I'm definitely doing the work. And with the manual and business plan kind of set up pretty good here at the start, I'm feeling pretty good about things. So, what are the key lessons I learned last week? Basically, getting ready to trade is not as fun as actually trading. This is definitely not the fun part of things, but it is critical. Getting organized and doing all this stuff is very time consuming. And I think that's why a lot of people don't do it, is because it does take a while to get yourself set up, and not only set up, but set up correctly to go into any business. Getting organized also starts to give you confidence. So as you set something up like this, you kind of have this feeling that, hey, you're doing this in a professional way. You're not just kind of jumping into this half-heartedly. So it does give you some confidence in that sense. So next week, I'm still focused on making sure I'm in a position to be able to live trade at the start of 2018. So that's always the big one. Here, what I want to do is build a trade ticket and next week really set up a strategy. Those are the primary goals that I'm going to be focused on next week. Looking at the S&P, we jumped up here and made a new all-time high, but it was pretty weak compared to the prior high. All this is going on and hanging out right at the 100% fib extension of the last pullback there. We basically have volatility dropping and no real strength. Our RSI is still pretty strong here. The one interesting thing is that amount of volume for this time of year. That's kind of odd. One interesting side note is momentum. We've lost momentum, but we still do have volume strength moving in the upward direction. And I think a lot of that has to do with this, big chunk of volume we've had over the last month or so in the S&P. So the Dow and S&P 100 are outperforming right now, and you've got the Nasdaq and mid-cap slightly underperforming. What's interesting is the two underperformers also have low volatility. So I was just sitting there pondering, if this does crash, could those be the things that lead us down? Because this VIX is now back under 10 again. From a sector standpoint, you have financials and discretionary leading the way. Utilities, real estate, and semis are kind of weak. Same sort of thing. I wonder if those lead us down if we do end up going down. Several of the top performing areas are in some sort of pullback mode, as you can see, and several of the lower performing areas, about half of these sectors, currently have low volatility situations. The one interesting thing to note about the futures here, there's a lot of these, everything except for oil is in a low volatility situation on a weekly time basis. This could lead to some sort of crazy explosion at the start of the year. You do have bonds making new highs, and then oil has a kind of a high base, low volatility situation hanging out on the daily basis. A couple interesting stocks coming out with earnings next week. You have FedEx, Micron, Bed Bath & Beyond, CarMax, and probably one of the bigger ones, Nike. Looking at news, it's all about the tax cut bill right now. And then obviously you've got the Bitcoin mania. They're still talking about that. And then Disney is buying Fox, and it looks like that deal is going to go through, which means they will control 40% of the media. It's kind of wild. Thinking about what the market may do over the next little while, I think the key is we are entering the holiday season, which historically has been kind of a lower volatility, lower volume environment. which means you tend not to get a lot of moves. And that's just what's happened historically. If we do make a new high, I got to think it's kind of small because we are losing that momentum in this move up. And it's also been a pretty big move up. The last time we had a pullback on the weekly to the 20-day moving average was in October, and that was around the 245 mark. So the question is, do we start pulling back? And if we do, what kind of ranges could we watch for this pullback? The first is kind of a smaller range, and that's if we pull back to about the 40%, that would put us right around the 263 area. A little larger one that would bring us back to prior resistance on this last move up would be closer to the 260 area, and that would be 60% of the pullback. So those are the areas I'm going to be watching, and it really comes into the question is, do we have a small range over the holidays, or does this move into a wider range? So for the stocks I'm going to watch here at the start, I am going to watch 4 different stocks and try to pick 2 a night to watch to kind of keep this little portfolio up and going. But I'm going to not only watch them, I am also going to trade them. And so I started a little virtual account to do this. It's at 100,000 is where it's starting at, but I'm going to pretend that I'm trading my real account size of 10,000. And the only rule I'm going to use right now is my 2% max risk. Now, to be able to do this and figure out how many shares I need, I'm going to need to come up with an exit point. So I'm going to always just use 2 ATR away as a general rule for all these studies. The ones I've set up today are the 2 longs are USO, JELD, and then the shorts are PCG and IR. So we'll keep an eye on these stocks and just see what happens with them.